everybody, and a pleasure to be here in London at this time of the morning from deepest Surrey, but here very much to take you through UKIP's policies for women, recognising very, very much the huge contribution that women now make to UK society in economic, in all sorts of areas, and it's important that the political parties actually address that. I'm going to start off by just presenting a bit of context for you, which is in a way, if you like, focused our minds on what we needed to address in terms of our policies. So let's put into context what women are now doing here in the UK. Well, first of all, 14 million of women now in work, probably the highest number for some considerable time. 1.4 million of those, 10% self-employed. More women, therefore, quite clearly the breadwinners in a family unit. And just short of 30% of households where there is only one adult, and in the vast majority of cases that is a lady, a woman, a female, however you want to title her, who's carrying all of the responsibilities that running a household entails. So I don't think any of you can doubt that the value there that women make in terms of a contribution to UK society is now well marked, and it's something that UKIP has very much taken on board. And we want to address, in terms of our policies, our very specific policies for women here in the UK, what we believe is some areas of absolutely outright discrimination, and bring into the fore some of our other policy areas which we think and believe will assist women in terms of their continuing contribution to the UK. I'm going to start off with the workforce, and I'm not going to be running through absolutely everything this morning. We will be issuing a document later on in the day when you'll get the, if you like, the full 100% picture. If I was to spend all morning doing that and taking your questions as well, I don't doubt we would have a very, very exhaustive and very valuable discussion. But I think what I want to do at this stage is actually highlight some of the very key ones that we feel. Now, of course, our political opposition is forever telling us that we're going to abolish this, that and the other, usually with absolutely no justification whatsoever. And I point the finger very much at the Labour Party, who seems to think that the continued misleading comments that they make in certain areas will somehow stick in voters' minds. So may I start by first of all saying that we will give full support, absolutely full support, unconditional support, for current maternity and paternity rights as well as adoption leave. We intend taking the lowest paid, and as I mentioned in terms of my introduction, that is typically women who are choosing to work part-time or in the self-employed capacity, out of tax altogether. Our points-based immigration system, which my colleague Stephen Wolfe MEP has talked about, we will utilise aspects of that to end excessive competition for minimum wage jobs, again mostly benefiting women. And according to the Office of National Statistics, we're looking at 59% of women that will see a benefit there. Childcare. Now, I don't happen to have a family, probably one of my biggest regrets in life. But I have an enormous amount of sympathy for couples, for single women, or for individuals who are trying to bring up children in terms of the excessive now increases we've seen in terms of childcare costs. 33% increase in 5 years. Typically £6,000 per annum for a unit, family unit, trying to find childcare costs for their young children. And this is now nearing the figures of around £120 per week on average. What I think is actually also rather shocking is that nearly 60% of local authorities are not fulfilling their legal obligation to provide childcare services. So we'll be looking very, very much at helping people and families in that area. We plan to reduce the cost of childcare. You will see, obviously, when we release our general election manifesto, the costing behind that. And we also want to see parents offered a much, much wider choice of providers. We certainly want to see wraparound, as we put it, childcare in the form of breakfast and after dinner clubs for all school-aged children. They will benefit, their parents will benefit, their relatives and their family and friends will benefit. Let me move on to just briefly to the family context, because that's obviously very linked here. What we do want to see is more support for the 6.5 million carers in the United Kingdom. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, most of whom, just short of 60%, are women. They will get from UKIP a commitment to increasing the carers allowance in line with inflation, and a commitment to keeping carers allowance at or above the job seekers allowance rate. And if I remember, only last year the European Union saw fit to tell the United Kingdom to double job seekers allowance rate. Well, that will raise a very, very interesting question, which I suggest you pose to our opposition parties as to how they will justify that in terms of their costings. I'm going to move on now to the health agenda and very briefly talk about what we would like to see happen in terms of benefits there for women in the United Kingdom. Now, we're very much focused on assisting for the birthing situation, for young mothers, and also ensuring that that whole area is correctly resourced. And I'll put into context that in the last 10 years, births across the United Kingdom have gone up by 25%, and that even the Royal College of Midwives has stipulated that they see a requirement for an additional 4,800 midwives. Now, despite that contextual information, I'm sure you'll be able to dig around, do your own Google searches, and you will see for yourselves how that whole resourcing area has crumbled under the coalition government. Huge numbers taken out, and a whole series of instances around the United Kingdom where mothers are being encouraged for stay-at-home births and feeling that they haven't got the necessary support that should be there. So we're looking at a starter position. We want to see 3,000 more midwives for the NHS. And moving on just slightly, and you might grin at this one, and I'll allow you to do that, we do want to see VAT removed from sanitary products for women here in the United Kingdom. Now, that's something that I feel very strongly about. I happen to be an MEP, and I still cannot believe that the European Union sees it appropriate to penalise women in that instance. And for the European Union to think and consider and voice that they see sanitary ware as non-essential luxury items, I think really is open to question. But going back to a very serious point, because I did obviously digress for a moment, ensuring all pregnant women and mothers of all children under the age of 12 months have direct access to specialist mental health treatment. What we recognise is the degree and incidence of postnatal depression amongst new mothers, and also the impact that that can have on their newborns. So we really want to see a focus in that area. I'm going to talk very, very quickly about domestic abuse, and I'm now obviously adopting my Justice and Home Affairs remit just for a moment. The issue that I think we will be indicating, signalling in our general election manifesto is the impact of domestic abuse across the United Kingdom. When something like that affects 1 in 4 women, and it accounts for 16% of all violent crime, that gives you some idea of the importance that we feel should be attached to that area. And you will see in due course what we want to introduce to address those aspects. All of our policies, though, will tackle what we see as child poverty and the real problems that we've got in that area. And no amount of posturing from either the coalition partners nor Labour have in any way addressed the child poverty matter in the United Kingdom. There are, of course, one final area that I do want to touch on, and it's in recognition of the multicultural society that we live in, and that is the whole area of FGM. On record, the estimate is in the region of 66,000 cases of FGM already in the United Kingdom. And the view is that because it's accepted cultural practice for some of our ethnic compatriots, that if not addressed is likely to increase and certainly continue. We want to see more effort into addressing that area, addressing it from the point of view of stopping it ultimately. Now that's a very, very high goal and a very high radar level, if you like, to set. But that would be our starter in terms of position and where we would want to move to. And I don't doubt that Suzanne will take questions on that for you. This morning I briefly stepped in to support Suzanne. I've taken you through some of our key areas. I hope I've highlighted the commitment that UKIP has to women across the United Kingdom, living here in the United Kingdom, and their contribution that they make to United Kingdom society. That cuts across a whole series of areas: wage earning, childcare and family support. And we believe, UKIP believes, we've got the policies that over the next 5 years, post May the 7th, will do and deliver for women the best possible deal. Thank you very much.
Alison Little, Daily Express, speaking as a woman, a female, not necessarily a lady. It's interesting you're calling this press conference this morning. I'm guessing it's a response to this very blokish image that UKIP has, led by Nigel with a pint in his hand. I'm interested to know whether you have ever sort of had to put your heads in your hands at some of the things that he and your male colleagues have said. Could I also take this opportunity to ask you to spell out and clarify UKIP's position on Trident, and any answer to Conservatives saying that failure to renew it puts us in danger as a country? Thank you.
Shall I try and speak, or does somebody else want to do it? Yes, I put my hands in my head, my hands frequently at some of the things that Godfrey Bloom said, and I personally and directly challenged him on them. And I'm very glad he has been thrown out of the party. He clearly wasn't doing our English for women any good. He wasn't the kind of person that we wanted in UKIP, and he's gone. As far as Trident is concerned, then we are, sadly, I think in this day and age, when the world is not a safe place, where we have some rogue states who have nuclear weapons, unfortunately, I don't think we are remotely in a position to look at nuclear disarmament now, so we would support the renewal of Trident.
Can I just add on Trident? Yes, we're fully committed to upgrading Britain's independent nuclear deterrent, and Trident is indeed our preferred option. And actually, 4 submarines aren't that much more expensive than 3 once you've made what they call the main gate decision and committed to it. But we think it's a bit odd that Michael Fallon should be trying to link the defence of the realm to the way in which Ed Miliband became Labour Party leader. And that personal attack, to me, speaks of a Defence Secretary who's trying to distract from the fact that the Conservatives are not pledging to fully resource our armed forces. They're not meeting the NATO 2% commitment. So yeah, of course, we would commit totally to upgrading Trident. We can afford to do so. Over the course of the next Parliament, we're committed to spending at least £16 billion extra than the Conservatives, based on an assumption that while they're not going to meet 2% of GDP, they wouldn't go below 1.9, where we are this year. But I'd advise Michael Fallon, lay off the personal insults. It's totally meaningless. There is no linkage between the way Ed Miliband became Labour leader and defence of the realm. And probably spend more of your time trying to persuade your cabinet colleagues and indeed the Prime Minister to properly resource Britain's defences.
Patrick, may I just have can I take your question, please, as well, from the, shall we say, the perspective you made of Nigel and women? I'd like to put on record for everybody here Cameron's cuties, Blair babes, just to give you 2, and the infamous situation in the House of Commons, calm down dear, with David Cameron doing this. That did more, in my opinion, and in the discussions I've had with women across the United Kingdom, to denigrate. They felt quite insulted, and I certainly felt insulted by that. Nigel has made comments. I would dare to contradict the position that they are always as inflammatory as the media would like to pose. But what I would say is, in terms of the position that UKIP takes on women and representation that we have in the party, just look at the contingent of women MEPs in the European Parliament. It's far higher than any of our political colleagues.
Sure, Claire, BBC News. You talked about your commitment to maternity pay and maternity leave. Do you have a view on heavily pregnant women seeking positions in the cabinet, i.e. Rachel Reeves? And just very quickly, your leader Nigel has said in the past that women are worth less than men in financial services. Is that still party policy? What's your view on that?
Nigel never said that. He never said women are worth less than men. He was talking about a specific time in a specific sector of the city, financial services. And he's consistently said he didn't say that. As far as heavily pregnant women working is concerned, I think I worked until the week I gave birth to my daughter, and I went back to work 2 weeks later. I don't see a problem with it.
Thanks. A year ago you were 20% in the polls. 3 months ago you were 16%. You're now down to under 15. In one poll you were 10. Your campaign's regarded generally as a shambles. It symbolically fell apart just before this press conference began. Isn't it truth that as people realise this is an election between Mr. Miliband and Mr. Cameron, you are fast becoming an irrelevance?
Perhaps we got you up a bit early today, Andrew, and interrupted your breakfast.
I've already been to 2 meetings and 3 breakfasts. Get on with the question.
I noticed, by the way, that this is called the Godfrey Mitchell Theatre, so I pledge not to whap you over the head with a document while calling you a pleb. But
you'd like to try me.
I think we're on daily politics together later. I don't think we were ever on a poll of polls 20%. I don't know where you've got that figure
You got
from.
24 in the European elections.
Oh yeah, that was in an actual election with a 35% turnout. We always said that's our home territory. I think our national poll rating is actually holding up very well. But what I would sort of draw out for you is our key strategic goals for this general election. One of them is to get clear, good second places in over 100 seats as a basis for 2020. The other, of course, is to win a good number of seats. So how we're actually polling as an average nationwide, national vote share is very nice, and I think polling average is 14 to 15%, is very good. I noted down a tweet some years ago from Dan Hodges saying he would streak if we got more than 6% in this general election. Well, 28 days to go, Dan, and perhaps we'll let you wear a Borat mankini to spare your blushes there. But our number one goal is obviously to get a good number of MPs elected, including our party leader. And we keep a much closer eye than you're able to do on how things are going in our key target seats. And we think the campaign's right on track.
Two very brief questions. Number one on maternity leave. You say that you fully support maternity and paternity leave, but I want just a bit of clarity on that. Do you mean that you support it symbolically, hypothetically, or what about businesses? Do they get to choose from one business to another whether they can apply it? Where does your support, how far does it go? That's what I want to know, specifics about it. Number two, should women be allowed to breastfeed in public, generally? Well, it's an important question that it caused quite an issue at the time when your party leader suggested that they should sit in a corner and breastfeed. Or maybe out of public view, but he did suggest that they should actually in general public view.
It was actually the presenter of the programme that suggested they should go sit in a corner. Nigel never said any such thing. He said well, I breastfed in public, for goodness sake. I don't have a problem with it at all. It's a natural thing, and frankly, I think anybody that gets upset about breastfeeding in public, that goes out and buys the Sun, is frankly a hypocrite. Nigel never said that. And as far as maternity leave is concerned, symbolic? Good heavens, no. As someone who has run a very small business myself, it can be extremely difficult. But actually the current maternity leave provision, where you have a year off, can for smaller businesses actually be helpful. It can be quite difficult to find cover for, say, 6 months or 9 months, but actually it's much more easier to take somebody on a contract for a year if you're a small business. So it's not just a symbolic support, absolutely not. When Diane said we fully support it, that's what we mean, fully.
Would you allow businesses to choose, though, whether they apply it?
No.
Hi, Laura Patel from The Times. You still suffer from a gender gap in terms of polling, that the party is generally a bit less popular among women. I'd be interested to know from the three of you, why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because of the lies that the other parties have put about us, what my colleagues say.
But why does that affect women per se?
Well, because like the lady next to you said, you know, there is this myth put about that we will scrap maternity leave, that we hate women, that we don't do anything for women. I mean, Diane and I are living proof, and our other MEPs and our other candidates around the country, some of them in our target seats, prove quite the opposite. But unfortunately, I think the depth of the propaganda that the other parties have put about on this has hit very hard and hit very deep. And it is just purely propaganda, in my view.
I would be slightly more self-critical of our party than Suzanne. I think Nigel himself has said sometimes UKIP has resembled a rugby club on tour. I think that's becoming less and less true. And indeed, the two absolute top-ranked female politicians sitting alongside me today are two of the main reasons for that. But we need to work harder, and there still are occasions where people in the party, men in the party who should know better, have occasionally resorted to boorishness or chauvinism. And you know, when that happens, I make sure I express my own displeasure. I think we're getting, you know, we're a very fast-growing party. We're increasing our attraction. It clearly is daft for us to see a political context where we're not maximising our support in every potential group. And, you know, as set out today, there is no reason why we should be lagging with women voters. We still are. We've got to work harder on addressing those issues, and we are doing.
Rowena Mason from The Guardian. You're launching your policies today for half of the population. Why isn't Nigel doing it? And secondly, did you put your head in your hands when Nigel agreed with Godfrey Bloom talking about employers being mad to hire young, free and single women?
Godfrey Bloom is history. You keep on reciting something that happened nearly 2 years ago. Can I suggest we put that to bed? Because if you don't want to put it to bed, we might as well revisit Lord Prescott thumping somebody, other politicians having eggs thrown over them, other politicians from our political opponents, actually undertaking acts which are frankly unacceptable, whether it's hitting people or whatever, or getting drunk, or you know, whatever the issues are. So I would be very grateful, personally very grateful, if you would respect the fact that that person is no longer with the party. He does not represent UKIP individuals whatsoever, and thus I'm not prepared to take any more questions on that one. Can you just remind me what the second part of your question was, please?
Where's Nigel?
The first question is why isn't Nigel launching your policies for women?
Well, he's a bit like David Cameron. There's not 650 David Camerons, there's not 650 Nick Cleggs. He, just like the other political leaders, is around the country with our various prospective parliamentary campaigners and individuals who are standing to become MPs, supporting them in terms of their launch platforms. And so, as far as I'm concerned, he's doing exactly what the other political leaders are doing and what voters expect him to be doing. They want to meet him, they want to discuss with him directly, and he is putting himself in areas where exactly that interaction can happen.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming along.
Thank you.
I'll see you later, Andrew.
See you later.